All right, my video got interrupted earlier, so I'm going to continue talking where I was left off. This left brake pedal is the one that operates the brake band that you can see here that goes around this drum, and this long bolt sticking out. That's your tensioner that you can adjust how much tension is on that, just at its base load, which pretty much what you want to adjust this inner Kelly. You want to have the bands adjusted just tight enough so that they will hold up however much weight that you might need to hold up, and not more than that. If you have it adjusted too tight, then the tighter you adjust the brake band, then when you're not actually pushing the pedal, the harder it's going to sit there and resist moving when you're not holding the brake and you're trying to lift it. So that will make it a little bit harder to spool cable in if you tighten that one up too tight. On the one that's got the clutch band, or the brake, it's a brake band that engages the outer ring of the planetary hoist, which makes whenever you put that brake on, then it spools the cable in. If you put that one too tight, then, or tighter than it needs to be, then it will sit there and rub all the time, because that drum is turning inside of the band whenever the rig is running. And so it'll get hot if you put it too tight when it's not doing it, even when you're not using it. And it just wears it out for no reason and uses more fuel. So just for the sake of making the rig last longer and run better and not require as much maintenance and not getting as hot, you just want to leave those as loose as you can, and where they'll still operate and do the job that you need them to do. So if you are digging holes that are shallower than about 32 feet, and if you're going to leave your outer and inner Kellys pinned together so that they operate as a unit all the time, then pretty much your inner Kelly doesn't need to do anything except just be able to spool in tight and hard enough to keep the cable spooled in on the drum, so that it doesn't have too much slack in it. If you let it have too much slack, so let's say for example that you had the brake on the inner Kelly hoist, and you lifted the Kelly, the outer Kelly, and they were pinned together, well, your inner Kelly is going to come up and you're going to have lots of slack in that cable, and that cable is going to turn into a bird nest up there on that drum, at least potentially. So you want to avoid that. So whenever you're lifting the outer Kelly, if it's pinned together with the inner Kelly, then you want to pull both levers at the same time so that they will run together as a unit. Now they're almost geared the same. If you pull them both so that they're both lifting, then the inner Kelly will go slightly faster than the outer Kelly. And so if they're pinned together, then if you have the Kellys down 30 feet or something like that, then if you're pulling both clutches hard on the way up, then they're going to start to fight each other because the outer Kelly won't want to be coming up as fast as the inner Kelly is trying to make it go. But generally speaking, if you're going to run it that way, where they're pinned together, then you just need to barely put tension on that, on this lever right here, the one that's in the middle, just enough to keep that spool running so that it's pulling in the cable as fast as the outer Kelly's lifting up the Kelly that's coming. And if you don't pull the outer Kelly tight enough to actually make it move, then it'll just be, the inner Kelly will just slip on that brake band, and it'll just keep a little tension in the cable if you're not pulling it too hard. So I will mention about these brakes. They have, let me see if I can put the camera down here. All right, it's on this side. You can see there's a hook on this pedal, and that the pedal can move this way. And if you notice down here on the floor, just below that, if I can get it in the camera, there's a little plate with a pin sticking off to the right. There's one of those for the left pedal, and there's another one for the right pedal. On the right pedal, you can see the hook is engaged right this minute around that pin. So what happens is this one has a greater range of motion on that pedal. This is the brake for the outer Kelly. So if you want stop the Kelly from going down or up, and you want to leave it that way, but you don't want to have to sit there and hold it in tension all the time. You basically rotate your toe up, you push it down, and then you can hook that hook around the pin, and that will hold that brake on. Same thing happens on the left pedal. Push it down, and if you want to push with your heel first, and then push with your toe, and that'll lock the brake in. And that will just hold tension on all the linkage that links to either of the brake bands. So you've got the brake band on the inner Kelly is this big one here, and this one right in front of the operator is the brake band for the outer Kelly. And all right, let me move on to the next subject, and I'll come back and talk about these things in a little bit more detail about how to think about them. All right, this one right here, the left lever, I've got a piece of pipe over it. Just I developed some tendonitis in my wrist, and so I put this pipe on here so I'd have better leverage and not have to pull quite as hard. But anyway, this one on the left, this is your digging clutch, and you'll use this one a lot. When you pull it to you, let's see if I can when you pull it to you, you can see that clutch moving over there. So this in the middle is neutral, and if you pull it to you, that engages the digging clutch at the top, and you can see when it, all right, so that's the digging clutch engaged at the top, and when I push it back to neutral, you can see it moves both bearings, the top one and the bottom one, at the same time. And so when I engage the bottom one by pushing it away, the top one just slides out more, and so it's still disengaged, but it's just further away from the engagement position. And so normally you will dig with the digging clutch. It will be rare that you would need to dig with a spin-off clutch, which is the bottom one. I have done it. Seems it's been a long time ago. I had some kind of trouble. Can't remember what it was that happened, but there was an issue that I had with, I'm trying to remember. This has been, I don't know, 15 or 20 years ago. There's a sprocket back here, and it runs on this spider that is like the big disc at the back side of the clutch. I want to say that something broke. Maybe the spider broke. I can't remember. It's been a long time ago. Anyway, something happened one time, and we were in the middle of a job, and the digging clutch wasn't working anymore. And it was, some part of it was broken. I can't remember which part, but anyway, somewhere in that linkage, you couldn't get power from that shaft to the sprocket. Or maybe it was I can't remember. There might be a key in there, like a keyway. Maybe the key broke, but I don't know. It's been so long since I've had one of those apart, I can't remember if it has a key or not, or if it probably does have a key. That might have been what it was. Anyway, the bottom one runs faster than the top one, sends more chain per time, and so everything runs faster, or the auger will turn faster and with less torque if you use a spin-off clutch. So, but you can dig with it if you need to. Most of the time, you only use it to spin the dirt off. So I'll get to that in a minute. But basically, if you pull the lever, it turns slower than if you push the lever. And if you put it in the middle, it goes to neutral, and then the Kelly stops turning. Now, there's no brake on the rotation of the Kelly. So let's say that you had it in a high gear and it was spinning fast. You just have to either, if you want to slow down the auger or stop it from turning like immediately, you basically have to put it on the ground to stop it. If you put it in neutral, then it's just going to keep turning until whatever friction in the system slows it down. All right, so let me talk about the transmission now. So you got the two clutches, and they send power through that double 80 chain to this sprocket that's right in front of the operator seat. And you've got a 3-speed transmission in forward and 1 reverse. So this is your shift lever for the transmission. And you've got 2 rails. The one on the left is for first and second gear. So right now it's in first gear. Now, the dog clutches, I don't know if you're familiar with dog clutches, but they're like, each gear has, they're helical style gears. They're like spur gears with the teeth on a slight angle away from the horizontal. So if you can imagine, there's kind of like a sprocket with the teeth you can see here, except it's gear teeth instead of sprocket teeth, and they're just on a little bit of a stew to one side, and that just makes them run a little smoother and quieter compared to one that's a straight tooth spur type gear. And on each gear, it would have those on the outside, and then on one face of the gear, the face of the gear that faces toward the middle of the pair. So let's say this, I think the nearest one, yeah, right on the other side of that, I'm trying to remember now, the output, okay, the input shaft, I think I'm saying this right, the input shaft, which this is the input shaft, and the output shaft is the one, let's see if I can hold down here where you can see, is where it's behind that cap on the right. The input shaft has 3 gears and a sprocket mounted on it, and they're all keyed to that shaft, and they all turn with the shaft the same speed. They just rotate together all the time. And on the output shaft, they have also 3 gears and 1 sprocket, but each of those gears is held in place with snap rings that keep them from moving along the length of the shaft, and then they have like a brass bushing style bearing on the inside of those gears where they ride on the output shaft. And so this way the different gears can all be engaged with the input shaft teeth, and they can run at a different speed from the output shaft. They can basically turn on the output shaft, or the output shaft can turn inside them, however you want to think about it. And the way that you select which gear is engaged and is in use is by sliding the dog clutch. So you slide the dog clutch, which is like, it has fat teeth on each face of it. So, and it has a key, or actually 2 keyways on the inside. So each dog clutch has 2 keys that ride in its keyways, and the key is tight on the inside of the keyway of the shaft, but it's loose where the dog clutch runs on that outer part of the keyway. And so the key, basically you got the shaft run through, and the dog clutch is turned this way, and it can slide along the length of the shaft. And when it slides along the length of the shaft, it has fat teeth on each side, and you can imagine it moves kind of like your hand is going closer or further away to the thing. And if you had 2 hands with your fingers meshing together, it's kind of the way the dog clutches mesh together with the teeth that are on the face of each gear. If I had one here, it would be easy to see what I'm talking about, because they're pretty simple. But if you're familiar with manual transmissions like you'd have in a truck, they're like that, except they don't have the synchronizer rings, and instead of the real tiny teeth that are on each side of the gears, they have real fat teeth. And so basically, I'm telling you all this to say that you cannot shift the transmission from one gear to another unless it's just either stopped and they happen to be lined up, like those dog clutch teeth are lined up, or if it's just barely turning. If it's turning fast and you try to jam it in gear, it's just going to beat the tips of those fat teeth to get together and make a lot of noise, and it's not really going to help you. So this wire is here, is an important tool, and that hole is there to keep this thing in first gear. So most of the time when you're drilling, you're going to be in first gear, and it has a tendency to try to walk out of gear, and I want to keep those dog clutches engaged as deep as they'll go, so that it's bearing on the most material possible and is going to be the least likely place to break off a bit of it. Like, let's imagine that this was not here, and you're drilling, especially if you're drilling in the same gear for a long time on hard rock or something, and it's vibrating and vibrating, and it's trying to go out and trying to go out and trying to go out. Well, now you get about this far, and it's just barely engaging the teeth, but it's still got the same full load going through it. And so what can happen is, if that's going on and you hit a hard spot or something, then it might break the little tip of that dog clutch tooth off, and then you've got trash in your transmission and a less strong dog clutch. So I keep this engaged whenever I'm digging, and I'll just slide that in to hold it in there, and that way it would have to shear that wire to vibrate out of that gear. But to go to second gear is straight ahead. Third gear is over into the away from you, and reverse is close. So you got first, second. No, that's not in gear. It's just, you can see it's got another 3/4 or an inch of travel. If I had it running, then what I would do at this point to get it to go into that gear is I would hold pressure against this lever with my right hand, and with my left hand I would take this clutch and I would just barely touch it until that starts to impart pressure against the clutch. And as soon as it's got a little pressure, then it'll send chain down and make that gear down here turn, and you can see it turning to know if it's doing what you want or not. And as long as you don't, now if you just grab it, it's going to turn way faster than that thing will pop in gear. So you just want to barely touch it until it just barely starts moving, and then that thing will then this lever will pop right in. Now I will say that if you have had a history of trying to jam it in when it's running, and it can make the tips of those dog clutches mushroom out just a little bit, and I don't do that, and I don't know for sure if people that had rigs before I had them did that, but I have had rigs that had that trouble when it was hard to get them to engage. And so the next time when I had a rig like that I had a problem with the keys breaking on the inside of the transmission on the gears, then when I would take it apart to replace the keys, I would take the dog clutches out too and touch them just a little bit with the grinder so that the ends were not so tight. And that makes a lot of difference whether once it starts in the gear, it goes in easy, but it's like the very first part, if they're too tight, it makes them hard to get to go in gear. So normally when you're digging, let's just imagine you're drilling a hole that's less than 6 foot diameter. Then you would dig in first gear, and you would put your auger down the bottom of the hole, and then you would engage you'd have your wire in here, and you would pull your digging clutch, right? And until it snaps in. For that last little bit, and you hear that little bump, is when once you pull it all the way in, it'll stay. Basically what's happening, I think I described in another video earlier, but you can't see them on here as easily because it's got covers on it. But you can see the spot on the right. Let's see if I can not touch it. I think that little mark, that's where that bearing engages with the little rollers. And once that roller pops up on the flat spot, then it's going to stay in there. When it's on the tapered section, if you let go of the lever, then it will push itself out and disengage any pressure that it had on it. So on the digging clutch, because you want it to sit there and run, or as long as, and keep torque going to it as long as you want, without having to sit there and hold pressure on the lever all the time, you want to adjust this clutch so that it will just barely snap in. Well, maybe that's not the right way to put it. All right, let me talk about this for a second. This piece, when it pushes in, it pushes those, I think it's 4 on these clutches, 4 little L-shaped pieces, and they rotate like this. So it's more like they're L-shaped like this, and the piece like where my fingernails are, it would rotate and push this way. Hang on, I gotta answer somebody.